Well, good evening, everyone. Thank you for being with us. Thank you to my dear friend Allie for introducing us. Thank you to everyone here at the Y. I know that events like this are ones they do regularly, and so they certainly have lots of practice, but I know they're able to do that because of just the extraordinary team that's here, from everyone doing the lights, ensuring we have Anna's beautiful book on the screen behind us, kind of the security, kind of the people, at the front of house and more. So I just am so thankful to everyone here at the Y for enabling me to be in conversation with someone I've had just the joy of getting to know over the last handful of years. And I wonder, Anna, if we could start with you sharing how we first came to be connected in the world.
So first and foremost, thank you all so much for coming through. Thank you so much, Chelsea, Dr. Chelsea Clinton. Put some respect on her name, yes? For just being in conversation with me and being such a guide over the last few years. It's so interesting. This is a question that I've been asked a couple times. Folks are like, so how do you know Dr. Chelsea Clinton? And I'm like, it's actually through a Twitter DM, believe it or not. So, if you follow me on Twitter, I'm not on there anymore, but, if you follow me on social media, I'm a bit unhinged. And so, occasionally I'll have a good take or two. And I think, Chelsea saw me maybe comment on something and followed me. And so I followed her back. And then I don't know, I shot my shot. And I was like, hey, you're Chelsea Clinton. Do you want to have a virtual coffee? And you were like, yeah. So we decided to talk over Zoom. At the time, it was 2020. And it turns out we actually had a lot in common. So first and foremost, I'm pursuing my PhD. She has her PhD. And so she also advises students. And so this relationship really sort of developed into a mentorship, sort of you guiding me. But also I think because you're one of the few people I know who has sort of an academic background that's also sort of very visible in the public space, I was taking a lot of cues from you as well. And so our conversations will really be about, how do we set the stage about the conversations that we care about, but also do it in a responsible way while also navigating all the ebbs and flows of being in the public eye. Obviously, she's more in the public eye than I am, but just a lot of lessons to be learned there. And so she helped me with my first book that was called The Black Agenda. I didn't write that book. I was sort of the MC of that book, right? The DJ, if you will.
Give yourself some credit. Give yourself some credit, Anna.
And so it just felt natural to invite Chelsea to be part of this project, which I feel speaks to your overall mission of women and girls and sort of how we make the world a better place.
Well, I'm so proud to be sharing kind of space and pages and a stage and a platform with Anna. I am deeply passionate about women who kind of want to and have the power to change the world, at least thinking about kind of pursuing serious scholarly work as one of the many mechanisms and means to do that. And certainly Anna has more than done that through her work at Harvard. She left out that sometimes we would have to talk about, yes, you still have to go to class. Yes. I know there's so many exciting things happening, but I promise there will be even more exciting things happening if you go to class. And more than kind of prove your place. And so it's also pretty extraordinary that Anna indeed has already now kind of brought into the world a second book. And so I wonder, Anna, if we can talk a little bit about the double tax and kind of what that means to you and what your work has painfully proven to be true for women and for women of color especially.
Yeah, shout out to going to class and shout out to my advisors. I'm still getting my dissertation work done, I promise. So the double tax is essentially defined as the compounded costs of racism and sexism. And I feel scholars who have studied misogynoir over the decades are really familiar with this concept.
Maybe define that if people don't know what that means.
Let me go ahead and sorry, we in class, right? So misogynoir is sort of discrimination and prejudice against Black women specifically, right? So sort of the combination of misogyny and racism. And so the double tax sort of takes that definition and expands it a little bit and says...
And quantifies it.
And quantifies it, right. Very heavy on the quantify. And to ensure that, we have a broader set of tools to think about when it comes to defining defining kind of how racism and sexism shows up in people's everyday life and also in society. I think what I've sort of used to sort of illustrate how the double tax manifests is there's these individual costs, especially that women of color deal with day to day. Costs
Give a couple examples.
I would say you're in the workplace, right? And you know that you're deserving of promotion. But because your boss has some, assumptions about people who come from your group, he or she might say, oh, or they, come on, days, might say, I don't know if this black woman is actually as productive as she is claiming to be, right? And that might affect whether or not you get promoted, whether or not you get a salary bump, et cetera. And so these are sort of things that I feel like, or at least in the workplace, that, women of color, black women in particular, will deal with. And what I say is sort of these individual costs dealing with racism and sexism that women of color face, if left unaddressed, become societal costs for everyone else. And one way I like to sort of visualize this is, imagine you're in your neighborhood, maybe you're in your apartment building, and you smell a smoke, a fire from afar, and you're like, let me go back home and, catch up on Family Feud or something like that. But if you leave that fire unaddressed, that fire can spread to your doorstep. And so really talking about the double tax in a way that's concrete, if we don't eliminate the double tax, there's more trouble that spells for everyone else later on.
Why do you think this book is not only important, I think you just answered that question, but why do you think this book is important now?
So the double tax has been happening for the last few months at minimum, right? In the public eye, let me maybe give a personal anecdote of what I'm talking about. So I don't know how many people know about Governor Lisa Cook. If that name sounds sort of familiar, can I just hear a yes? Exactly, I know that's
But again,
right.
if not everyone said yes.
That's okay, but I'm about to tell you who she
Okay.
is. I'm about to tell you who she is, yeah. So she's the first woman of color and the first African-American woman to be appointed to the Federal Reserve Board of Governors. So for folks who don't know what the Fed is, the Fed basically manages our economy, right? And so there's a whole system of banks, and these governors sort of oversee the banks. They're the ones who sort of call the shots on the interest rates that determine whether or not you can buy a home tomorrow or whether or not your groceries are going to go up or down in the grocery store. And so what's happening right now is she's being attacked by a certain individual. I'm going to just leave it like that. And these attacks, arguably are because this individual and the administration around this individual see black women as sort of the weakest link, right? They're happy to attack them because, they're most expendable. Society sees them as most expendable. I can be racist, I can be sexist, and no one's really going to check me. But this is a really good example of the double tax because if she gets removed, and I don't think she will, but if she gets removed, that means that the person in charge right now can appoint somebody who will likely be way less qualified than Governor Cook. So for folks who don't know, Governor Cook is probably one of the most qualified macroeconomists out there. She's worked in a third of the Federal Reserve Bank. She understands the banking system globally and domestically. And so you want someone like that who is in charge of the economy or managing the economy. But this is very much an example of if you don't address sort of the racist and sexist attacks that she's facing, there spells, economic catastrophe for everybody else.
Well,
Sorry,
yes.
that was very doom and gloom. My bad.
No, I think it's important to be candid about the stakes, and I think often it's easier for us to have kind of conversations rooted in kind of individual stories that help elucidate kind of the larger societal stakes than to start just at the level of kind of data and statistics. Because I think often, and I say as someone who loves data, and frequently when I'm asked in interviews, what was the best class you ever took in college? I'm like, statistics. But, thank you. Someone laughed. Thank you. Shout out to my Stanford statistics professors. That I do think it's hard, though, to feel like that is relevant to us, right? As you were saying with the smoke analogy earlier. But when we're forced or invited to reckon with what's happening to a real person in real time, I think the injustice is just then so much more evident and hopefully then galvanizing.
Yeah, let me double click on that. I feel like this is sort of where economists sometimes can miss the mark. Shout out to economists, if you're an economist in the room.
And you are?
I guess I'm an economist in
Okay.
training. Yeah. Okay. Right, I'm working on it. But I think that, this is where I think sociology is really great, public health is really great, because I think that there's value in stories. One of the biggest things that I learned as I was putting this book together is, I don't know if folks know this was like a huge group project, right? So we had qualitative researchers, we had research assistants, we had our wonderful chief of staff, Aisha, who's somewhere in the crowd. Say Aisha, somewhere in the crowd, right, holding this up. But we also had hundreds of women's stories as part of this. And I think what the data says is, what's happening in inequality is happening at scale. And then what the stories say is, and it's not like some sort of arbitrary hypothetical thing that's taking place. It's happening to real people. And here's a story that proves that the data is not, out of nowhere. And I think having those two things in tandem together helps us better understand the depths of inequality, but also, allows us to really chart a pathway forward that says, okay, how do we, ensure that things are, improved at scale, but we're also not leaving behind sort of these individual lives that are taking place in between the data.
I think it's so hugely important, and also I hope, and we haven't talked about this, but I hope too, that this book grants kind of space and permission for more women to tell their stories, because I think oftentimes kind of inequality persists because people internalize that it's somehow only about them, instead of about the system and about actually something that is happening to lots of people that look like them or have a similar kind of history and background.
Yeah, let me just add something to that too. I mean, I think I told you this when we first started writing, but we actually put a call out to invite, women and non-binary folks to share their stories about the costs that they face.
We put a call out like on Twitter.
On Twitter.
Back when you were on Twitter.
Yes, back when I was on Twitter. LinkedIn, we reached out to women organizations. Guys, we got like 4,000 responses, which is nuts, right? And that's when I knew like...
So you were like, I'm a Harvard PhD student. You weren't like, come join me on the pages of Allure magazine or something. I don't know, something, right? It's really like impressive that you were like there with your academic kind of credentials, very clear about kind of the purpose and the hypotheses that you were testing in this work. And like 4,000 people responded to an academic.
Right, and that's rare, y'all, to be honest. I'm not gonna lie. And my advisors were like, why didn't you turn this into like a randomized control experiment? Anyway, I'm talking economic speak, but they were like, you could have used this for your dissertation.
I was like, why didn't you, also other people were like, why didn't you just make this your dissertation? Like,
this is a side project, you know what I'm saying? But, it's true.
Most people's like side project are like, I'm gonna learn how to like knit. And that's awesome. Like I grew up, my grandmother was a knitter. I learned to knit as a child. And Anna's like, I'm going to just basically do a second PhD project without getting credit for it in my PhD, but it's still really important and meaningful and valuable in the world. And she's totally right. And also when you have your own students, I hope that you persuade them to maybe just like consolidate their effort a little bit.
But yeah, I mean, I think ultimately like seeing those individuals respond to the call, like I remember telling my team, okay, I think we're on to something here. And, when we were in these conversations, we were only able to randomly select 100 of them to be part of this book because of just time and resources. It was really clear from those conversations that people were, like, seeking out, like, some sort of outlet to talk about this openly, right? I think it's a bit taboo in society to be like, yeah, it's really expensive to be a mom. Because then people say, well, do you hate being a mom? Well, no, but, like, childcare is as much as my mortgage, and that's a problem. You know what I'm saying? And so I think that, having these honest conversations and hopefully this book being part of the catalyst for those conversations happening out in the open, especially right now, I feel like it's going to liberate folks, also validate folks, but hopefully allow us to really sort of push forward towards solutions that don't leave people behind.
Well, as you kind of were just mentioning motherhood, I was thinking about kind of the announcement a few weeks ago from President Trump of kind of introducing what he has not surprisingly called Trump accounts, effectively saving accounts for every kind of new child born in America or children that were born within the last 3 years and depositing $1,000 into these accounts. And he spoke about how he hopes that this will catalyze a real baby boom in our country. And I thought then, as I would say now, like I absolutely like think it's a wonderful kind of individual act to quite literally like invest in children's futures so that hopefully as kind of there's compound interest, it can help facilitate, as the administration has articulated, like children going to college if that's what they want to do, or vocational school, or getting job training, or starting a business if they're kind of entrepreneurial. And also, I was thinking, you're making it harder for expectant new moms to keep their health care. You're making it harder for expectant new moms to access like good nutrition for themselves and their children. We still don't have paid maternity leave or actually even mandated maternity leave. Like you're like so close, maybe, and comma.
Right.
And so I though want to then kind of use that contemporary like kind of snapshot segue though, and to ask you to reflect on the solutions that you offer, because one of the things that I really respect about you as a person, as an academic, is that you certainly have a fierce curiosity around like understanding the contours of a challenge of kind of fleshing out the quantitative and qualitative data to really help more people hopefully understand the challenge, and then similarly applying a real data evidence-driven kind of perspective to what solutions could really work. And I ask the question that way because there are a lot of academics who I really respect and am incredibly grateful to, I would argue especially in kind of economics and labor economics, who are really good about highlighting challenges and often then don't then propose, because often, to be fair to them, they don't think that's their job or their remit, or they don't have all the data, like what then kind of the solutions would be to ameliorate the challenge or actually totally like close a gap. So I guess I want to now ask two questions. One, why was it important to you to include some of the solutions, and what are the solutions that you think are most important for people to pay attention to?
Thank you so much for that question, and also for all those compliments. Shout out to my mom and dad who are like, wow, you're getting a +1. Anyway, so, let me maybe break it up in a couple points. I might also like forget, so feel free to like just remind me of the question. So first and foremost, like writing the motherhood chapter and really all the caregiving chapters radicalized me, right?
And what do you mean by that? Because I feel like we use the word radicalized
Right.
a lot now.
We do.
And I think it is one of those words that while we're using the same word, we, at least I hope, often mean different things.
Yes.
by using that verb.
Exactly. So, I have an older sister who has 2 kids under the age of 5. And I remember having a conversation with her a while back and being like, she was telling me about childcare, and she was like, I'm looking for a babysitter or something like that. And I was like, oh, why don't you just hire a nanny? And she just went silent. She was like, you don't know what you're talking about. You don't know what you're talking about. And it wasn't until I started writing the mothering chapter, in the chapter called The Balancing Act, which is about caregiving, that I began to really understand the sacrifices my sister and my mom had made, right? Like just the fact that people are, I'm gonna try not to get emotional because I see my mom right there, but like, I was like, just like how much of yourself that you're giving to your family and those around you, and how much people depend on you day to day. If you're an immigrant child, potentially, that sometimes your parents would, wake up at like 7 a.m. and they would be talking very loudly and enthusiastically on the phone. And for me, that was my alarm clock for a very long time. My entire...
You're like some immigrant children.
Of the West African variety. That being said, I feel like, at the time I was like, why are my parents talking so much on the phone in the morning? But then I came to learn that like my mom, a lot of our family members depend on her, right? And that was sort of what the caregiving chapter revealed. And I would say for the mothering chapter, what radicalized me was, that was a chapter, if you guys read it, I hope you do, it's the longest chapter in the book. I actually couldn't stop writing it. I could have written a whole book about it. Because it was just
Maybe that's your third book.
You giving me more homework. But it was just like, Okay, so an ultrasound costs money if you don't got insurance, right? Then having the baby, it's like $24,000 if you have a C-section. You're more likely to have a C-section or an unplanned C-section if you're a black woman, right? So I've seen a loved one experience that right away. And then we're not even talking about raising the kid yet. I learned about something called newborn daycare, where people literally pop out the baby and they put them in daycare and they go to work. And I thought that was wild, right? So I was like, wait a minute. You're already paying for daycare like 3 weeks out, and then you're not getting paid to take care of the kid that the society is telling you to have in the first place, right? And so, I know that there's like a quote in the book where I say, women are punished for choosing motherhood and for not choosing it, right? If you decide to become a mom, the workplace is going to punish you. They're going to pay you less. They're going to hire you less. They're going to promote you less as compared to all your counterparts. And then you have all of this societal pressure to be only there for your kids all the time. There's like a loss of individuality. But then if you decide, hey, I don't want to be a mom, suddenly, oh, she's a childless cat lady, and how could you waste your life, and da-da-da. And there's all this like societal stigma that's associated with not having kids. Let's go to solutions. Sorry, I'm just talking through problems right now. I think with mothering, let me maybe make it kind of personal. I think we need more public options for childcare, right?
Which is what most of the wealthy world does.
Right. And it's also what the administration is cutting or trying to cut. I'm a Head Start kid. Head Start, okay, period, right? Head Start, like, changed my life, right? I remember all of my teachers, Miss Minnie, Miss Nikki, and I also remember that it essentially opened up an opportunity to go to this private school where basically the private school was required, correct me if I'm wrong, Mom and Dad, the private school was required to admit one student from Head Start as part of their, incoming class. They did a whole interview process, and our family was selected, and I got a full ride. And that, I would argue, set me on a path that was very different from my peers. But I think the public care options are incredibly important. We're starting to see some of this sort of rolled out in Massachusetts and other states like that. We know, Minnesota is also starting to pilot it. It's really important that people know that their kids are taken care of. Like, people just want their kids to be safe, fed, and happy, ideally, right? And so I feel like, making it harder for people to take care of the kids you're asking them to have is diabolical at best. You know what I'm saying? And then on top of that, I think there's also the baby bonuses, the $1,000. I think he said $2,000. Now, he knows it's not $2,000 to raise a kid, right? I think even sort of the child tax credit itself could probably be more generous. So I think overall, there are policy solutions that, are on the floor right now that can make things easier for parents that are raising children. But there's also things that could come together at a local and state level to ensure that anybody in your neighborhood has access to, free and accessible quality childcare. Yeah.
Well, I think also your mention of Massachusetts and Minnesota is really important because I think that for those of us who believe in a robust kind of social solidarity and believe in investing because it's not a giveaway, it is an investment in our shared future. Investing in programs like what Anna talked about, it can be a slightly worrying time. Mm-hmm. And so I think it is then all the more important to shine a light on states, because it is often at the state level, although sometimes it's at a more local level, who are like putting optimism into action and like not taking the status quo for granted and trying kind of different ways to actually better support families and working moms. And I think too, Anna, and this is, I know, kind of outside the remit of kind of what you kind of chose already expansively to talk about in the book, we also really need to understand, as you said, like it's not $1,000 to raise a child. Actually, there was a study published yesterday that it's $5 million to raise a child if you want a middle class, robust life of like all the healthcare costs. And this was against the backdrop, because the study was really showing how all of the changes in the big bill, I refuse to use the middle descriptor, the big bill are making it actually like substantially more expensive to raise a child because healthcare is going to get just that much more expensive. Childcare is not getting less expensive. If we look at inflation in like school supplies, like all the different
absence of vaccine
pieces that. Okay, do you see my guys? Do you see my?
Now,
Look,
let's
look,
give a clap for that.
oh,
Exactly.
This one. Yeah. Okay, look.
I know that's right.
These are my best
Walgreens.
accessories. Walgreens. Walgreens. COVID in one arm and flu in the other arm.
That's
Thank
right.
you very much. Thank you, Governor Hochul. Also talking
Yes,
about sales. Thank you,
that's right.
Governor Hochul, for ensuring that those of us who believe in science
don't want to be sick
and don't want to be sick and don't want our children to be sick.
That's right.
Can get vaccinated. So shout out to Governor Hochul and her public health team that I know is working like just tirelessly to figure out whatever may be coming down the pike to continue to ensure that at least here in New York, we have evidence-based, science-based guidelines that we're also able to actually kind of use and access the care, the preventive care that we know is so crucial to keep ourselves and our family safe. So I think it is really important, and I would hope that as you continue kind of to be like, on your book tour and as you continue with your academic work, you do continue to focus on solutions and really like shining a light on, or at least maybe like the possible solutions, the solutions that are in trial, because I think that really matters as we think about who's really leading in our country, and also really matters to just continue using like vaccine-related words to inoculate ourselves from the sense of like nothing good is happening, when actually like quite a bit of good is happening.
I love that. I think that's kind of what I want folks to leave with when they're reading the book, that there's a lot you can do in just your own backyard to make things a lot better for the people around you. Kind of going back to a point that you made around economists, common theme here. One of the reasons why I decided to become an economist in training is that a lot of people listen to economists, even when they're trying to cite like numbers that are a complete bull, right? Like they're still saying, according to economists. And I think that to your point about,
Why do you think that is?
I think people think that numbers are purely objective. And as you'll see in the book, they're not, right? Like you can, run a study that looks at, how unequal things are, but depending on the framing of the question, you can get very different answers, right? And very different conclusions. There's one study, hey, it's okay. There's one study that, it's no tea, no shade, but like the study basically finds that if black women and white women had, similar parental income rank background, right? Their parents made the same amount of money, that black women would be earning more over their lifetime. But the reality is like, history's a thing, you know what I'm saying? So like, we can't ignore that context. And later on, those authors added that as like, a paragraph like, hey, actually, we can't ignore the sociology and historical evidence, et cetera, et cetera. But I think ultimately, economists are too important to the policy-making process to be like agnostic about it. I think there is a bit of a responsibility that we have to say, okay, if we're going to be looking at the numbers, what sort of ways do we want to ensure that the numbers make the world a better place? And I think a lot of people think that that's sort of like a normative take, but I feel like, we're human beings. Like, do you want your numbers to inform a worse world or a better world? And I think that, as a human being, I would like to live in a better world. I don't want to live in a world where things are going badly. Yeah.
Well, that's because you're a decent human being, too.
Oh, thanks. Likewise.
Thanks. All right, so I think we already answered the first question. So I know we have like 10 minutes. I'm going to try to get to everyone's questions. How should women of color navigate demanding respect and equitable pay without the fear of getting blacklisted?
Woo, girl. I don't know who asked this, but... there's a story in the book called, it's in the chapter Dollars and Cents, SENSEE. You see what I'm saying? Okay, I play with that a little bit. And I wish I had double clicked on it. I remember kind of going back and forth with my editor about it, but like, essentially the story goes that, for my first corporate big girl job, I got a call from a recruiter that I was applying for these jobs and, she was selling can I cuss? The hell out of these jobs. Sorry, mom and dad, right? And ultimately, she said, their 401k, there's all these benefits. I was like, amazing. And then I said, okay, what's the offer? She goes ahead and says a number. I start laughing. And I laughed a little too loud because she was like, is something funny? And I was like, the offer, right? But the lesson here, to answer this question, is I'm realizing that multi-generational support is extremely important. Older women of color, especially black women, I'm assuming this might be a black woman who's asking this question, are really, really important. And I don't know who I'm talking to here, but if you're an older black woman and you don't have a younger black woman, or even if you're an older woman, you don't have another woman that you are guiding and really assisting along their path, I don't know what your legacy is, quite frankly, right? And this older black woman who was a higher up in the organization, she said, look, accept the offer. I'm going to double click on the back end and we're going to get you the number that you want. I kid you not. I said, okay, I'll accept the offer. The lady said, amazing. And I said, great. And then 24 hours later, her boss's boss called me and she said, hey, we were so excited to have you. I said, amazing. And then she said, I heard you didn't like the number. What number do you want? And I said, I gave her my number. It was like $20,000 above what they were asking. And she said, you've got it. And I don't know what homegirl said in the back end, right? But I think that this idea of networks, I mean, we talk about that a lot, like, in college spaces and in job training spaces, but I think that, like, community, let me put it like that, is really, really important. It's hard for people to really do you dirty if you're linked up with somebody else. And that's kind of how I've navigated this space. Governor Lisa Cook, for example, is my mentor. And the way I've been able to navigate the economic space and still keep my, my head on right and not crash out is because that woman is looking out for me, right? So I think that is how you do it. And I would also say an advice that Issa Rae gave, a couple folks a while back is also link up with people next to you, right? So I think a lot of times, you might feel like you're in competition with your peers. Oftentimes they're trying to climb the same ladders you're climbing. And, there's an African proverb that says, if you want to go fast, go alone. But you want to go far, go together. And that's really coming from the idea that somebody might know the better route that you should be taking. But you wouldn't know that unless you were linked up with them. So that's kind of what I would say.
Great.
Yeah.
Next question. Yes. I know you have a connection to Sadie Collective.
Oh.
How do you think we can get more girls and women of color involved in economics?
Well, we need more girls and women of color in economics to begin with. So we make up 0.28% of the economics profession. Yes, that's less than a third of 1%. I think it's 4 out of 1,385 economic PhDs in 2023 were black women. Well, one, join the Sadie Collective. Let's start there, right? It's free. It's a great community. But I also think that what people don't know about that specific organization is that we were scrappy. We founded that organization when we were in our early 20s. I think I was like 22. And so that just goes to show you.
I love that you're talking about yourself like you're so old. Wait, how old are you now?
I'm 29.
Yeah, you're not even 30. It's like, oh,
so
when I was such a young girl. I'm sorry, I know this is an important question. I didn't mean to take away, but you said that and I was like, okay.
Yeah, you're right.
Wow.
I'm so sorry about that. But my point there is that, like, at any age, you can create the community that you need. And that was sort of the ethos of the Sadie Collective. Fata and I were like, Fata's my co-founder, we were like, wow, we're in some like predominantly white and male spaces. At the time, she was at the Federal Reserve Board in DC, and I was at UChicago. Despite being in Chicago, I was like, where are the black people? Turns out they're not on the campus. So I was like, that's crazy. That being said, I think both of us were kind of inspired in parallel, and we were like, wait, we need community. We have, Governor Cook, but our friends don't. How do we just bring these people together? And y'all, we were scrapped. We went on Twitter. We said, y'all got money? Can y'all bring us together? And people said, absolutely. So Mathematical Policy Research gave us their space for free. People from all over donated. I think it was almost like $14,000. And we got like over 100 black women in one room on like a Saturday or something. And it's been 7 years going now. I'm no longer involved in leadership. It has outlived me. So I think that sometimes we underestimate how much of a catalyst we can be. And I think that, again, that comes down to linking up with somebody so you don't feel so alone in your pursuit. Yeah.
And can I ask, yeah, please.
Thank you.
Can I just ask a follow-up question
Sure.
for anyone here in the audience who might have like younger kids, right? So like younger girls of color in their life who are not yet, in college. How would you or what would you share with them for how they could help, a 12-year-old who really cares about the world, since we talked about that earlier, right? Who likes talking to people, learning from people, likes math. Like, how can you advise the people here to talk about like what an economist does?
Yeah.
So that it could even just be inserted into like a middle school girl's brain as she's thinking about like what she might want to be when she grows up.
It's crazy. One of my cousins sent me a photo of his daughter. His daughter is a genius, by the way. She's like 10, and she was reading the book, The Double Tax. And I was looking at her, I was like, girl, you understand what's going on there? But I think I think if I had to explain this to like my niece, right? My niece is getting ready to go to college. I would say economics is using numbers to understand problems that affect people, right?
Great.
And that's what we do. So
It's way more succinct than I heard in like Econ 101 at Stanford, by the way.
right, like math is scary, but I think that what got me into it was, okay, like it's just a means to an end. Like I'm trying to get rid of racism, but I can use sort of math and data and policy together to say, okay, like how do we sort of bring these things together to kind of alleviate this problem? For those who don't know, once again, I'm a PhD student. So my dissertation focuses on, in short, making it really hard for your boss to be racist. Like that's really what I do. And the way I do it is, or for the sake of the current climate, talent development and acquisition, right? Whatever. That being said, right? What I'll say is, designing interventions to specifically target inequality and discrimination in the workplace. Like for me, I didn't realize that work was going to be mathematical, but once I realized like that's my end goal, that's really what I want to do, and these are the steps that I need to take. I think for me, I look to role models, right? Governor Lisa Cook was the first Black woman economist I ever met, but I also, I don't want to like toot my own horn, but like I also try to become a role model or a guide for other people. I think it grounds me knowing that somebody's looking up to me and they're relying on me to also show up for them. And so, yeah, I would say like those are the ways that I feel like, we can kind of get younger folks into it, make sure that they have representation that they can sort of cite as a point of reference, but also making sure that they're not scared of the steps that are needed to take to get to that level. Yeah.
All right, I'm going to try to...
Going through rapid.
I know, well, we have like supposedly like I think 2 minutes, but I'm going to...
Okay, sorry.
I'm still going to ask the last two questions because I think they're important ones. Yes. All right, given the emotional toll of the current geopolitical environment...
Wow.
What is your advice to Black women on how to stay positive and mentally well and stay engaged in discussions with people who have political views that are harmful toward us?
I think we got to mind our business a little bit. You know what I'm saying? Okay. Here's what I mean by that.
But the first point too, like how do you keep yourself emotionally?
Sure.
Right.
Let me start there.
I understand the second part is maybe
yes.
more electric, but I want to be respectful that someone was asking you for advice.
That's right. That's right. So I think for me, the next generation is like really my driving force, right? I also feel like I've been purposed to do this, despite it being hard and tiring sometimes. But I look at my nieces, my niece, Yaya and Gigi, they're under the age of 5. Shout out to Ellen, my sister who's watching. And then my niece Tia, who's headed off to college. And I think about, if I can just make this world just like 1% better for them, I think it's worth it, right? Because that 1% might mean that they might not have to fight as hard to get paid equitably, or they might not have to deal with a maternal mortality crisis when they're on their delivery, in the delivery room or something like that, on the delivery bed. I often say that like I study racism and sexism so that my nieces and younger people don't have to. That's kind of how I think about it. I'm like, I'll take the hit, I'll take the hit. And it's okay. Because I think that they deserve a better world than we've lived in. I know there's a lot of people who don't actually agree with that. They're like, we need a better world right now. And it's like, yes, but a lot of the work that, the civil rights movement sort of set up, a lot of social movements across the world, colonialism, the anti-colonial movement set up, we're living in it. My parents were born the year Ghana became independent, right? But there was people who were working before they were even born. You know what I'm saying? And that doesn't mean that their work is moot because they didn't get to see the fruits of their labor. My parents got to live in an independent Ghana, right? They got to be raised in that. And so I feel like that to me is worth it. In terms of the second part of that question, mind our business a little bit, right? And what I mean by that is I think that Black women, a lot of people rely on us for a lot of things. And we don't ever really get compensated or credited or even really acknowledged for the kind of work and effort that we put forth for a lot of people. And I think I've gotten to a point in my own life where it's like, if you are taking from me at this point, I need you to disappear, right? Like, I need you to disappear for a moment. Because I think part of it is, we give so much. The question is like, who gives back? And I think that is actually something that, in this process of even promoting the book, I've learned that Black women, we pour into each other. Like, we are pouring into each other day to day. And I think that a lot of times we're the ones who sustain ourselves and sustain our communities. And I think we need to be really, really intentional about how we do that, especially now. I just happened to be on Therapy for Black Girls today. And I was going in on this a little bit where, I was like, man, like.
Explain what that is.
Oh, sorry. Therapy for Black Girls is a wonderful platform that connects Black women and women of color to women of color and Black women therapists. I find all my therapists there. They're incredible. So I was very happy to be on their platform. But that's all to say that, like, therapy is one way that we can kind of just reason through the world, try to figure out what's going on. If you have a community of faith, that might be another way that you can reason. But I also think just relying on other Black women and also fueling other Black women as well. And pouring into the next generation also, for me at least, it energizes me. And so I think those are the ways that I feel like when I say mind our business, I mean, mind the business that pays us and that actually acknowledges our existence and our humanity at this point. Yeah. Damn, okay, thank you.
Well, Anna, all of the people that you have and are and will mentor will be very lucky. All right, so last question, which I think is a perfect note to conclude this portion of the evening. Where do you see yourself in 10 or 15 years? That's the question, and then I'm going to add another. And how can we help you get there?
Oh, that's nice. Wow. Thanks, Chelsea. Mom and Dad? No, I'm joking. They're like, huh? Okay. So I had the opportunity this past spring to teach or co-teach a class. I taught the economics of social policy with my man, Dr. Mark Shepard. And, my dad is like an educator at heart, I think. And I feel like my love of education has really come from my dad. And I don't know, I kind of used that semester and said, if I like teaching, I will let this be a big part of my career. And I loved it. Oh my gosh. Like, I was like the students and just like, I don't know. There's something so fulfilling about seeing students understand a concept. Like, I don't know, for me, it was just it just made my heart burst. And I think the other thing that really caught me off guard were the types of students that trusted me. So I expected like the Black women in the class, all 5 of them, right? To like, this is Harvard, right? To like come and seek out advice and stuff. But it was like the white guys also coming and trusting me as well. And I was like, I didn't realize I had broad appeal, you know what I'm saying? And so, ultimately I think teaching is gonna be a big part of my career, both, in the classroom and out of the classroom. This, like, I think the work that I do, even online, as unhinged as it is, I'm always teaching you something, right? I think public scholarship is really about to be the career that I pursue. We've had a long 5-year conversation about the best way to do this, right? And there's a lot of really great blueprints for me to follow, like Dr. Tressie McMillan-Cottom, Dr. Clint Smith, who also went to Harvard, Dr. Eve Ewing. I'm mentioning only sociologists, but there are economists too, folks like that. But that being said, I think for me, the reason why I think public scholarship is going to be really sort of the defining quality of my career is because I really believe that y'all deserve to know how the world works, right? I believe that fundamentally. And I think that a lot of the ways that the world works is hidden behind paywalls. It's like Harvard has access to everything. We have access to all the books, all the old books, I think like the first Bible or something. Like, we have access to everything, right? And I think, like, just talking about what inspired this book really quickly, I remember I was at a speech, something like this, and, the room was packed. And afterwards, a white guy came up to me, he said, are you sure that black women are really gonna be like the best way to determine whether or not we're actually moving forward? And I was like, yes, were you not at the speech? And he was like, I was, but like, prove it. And that's when I was like, now I can't cite sources off the top of my head. I'm not an encyclopedia, but I think that was a challenge of like, you actually don't have the same set of facts that I do. And that's just because of access. And if I can be the bridge between you having information and that information just sitting there, why not, right? And I understand that that comes with a huge responsibility. It comes with a lot of hate. It comes with a lot of, scrutiny, people thinking I'm too young to do this. But I also feel a sense of purpose, like, if this means that the world's a little bit better tomorrow, it's worth it.
Well, Anna, the world's already a little bit better
because
of you. And really, thank you again to everyone at the Y. Thank you, Anna, for being with us. Thank you for bringing your parents.
Oh, and thank you, Chelsea.
With you. Oh no!
Shout out to your team.
Well, I'm just honored always to be here and to be your champion and to be your friend.
Oh,
please give Anna another round of applause.
Thank you so
everyone.
much, Chelsea.